everyone, welcome to another What I Would Have Done Thursday, and today I thought it would be interesting to briefly address an animated film again, and I think one that is rather different than the previous one that I discussed. If you look in my video library, since I talked about the Swan Princess, James and the Giant Peach, as you can see by the title, is something that is rather different in its focus, both on an animation level as well as a story level. And in the same way as sort of the Swan Princess, I think it definitely falls short of as to what could have been for in comparison to what ultimately we got from this film. So I thought it would be interesting to briefly discuss my thoughts and my ideas as to what I would have done to, I think, make it better. The premise of this film is a little bit absurd because we start off with James and his family, and then his family being eaten by rhinos. Yes, that's kind of your opening for this film. Parents being eaten by rhinos. Although that was not in the book, which was written by the same person who wrote the book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I always get confused on what title it is, but the author is Roald Dahl. His name is tripping me up too. I apologize. But it's just a very odd premise. But in the book, it explains that the rhino, I guess, stampeded the family. He didn't actually eat the family. But in the film that this movie is trying to base itself off of, or but in the film, the the parents are basically eaten up. And I find this to be probably the most bizarrest scenario that I've seen within an animated film. Usually animated films, especially ones that are generated more towards children, don't really go with something as bizarre as this. And I think for a variety of reasons, especially when kids will probably be scratching their heads the whole time going, how can rhinos eat humans? But basically, as a result of this strange scenario, I think it would have been better had they dropped this premise and they just had the child just be an orphan, maybe to start off. Maybe parents were killed, maybe they ended up going missing and were never found, and so he's placed in an orphanage, the child, James. Instead of having his parents being eaten by rhinos, because I just think, or eaten by a rhino, I just think that's completely absurd and unnecessary to put in this kind of a story. Also, I think, again, they tried to create sort of Cinderella tale with this, in that they, in that basically he's sent to some evil relatives, similar to how Cinderella, except within Cinderella's case, it made a lot more sense. It was logical and thought out. This is just half-baked, put together evil people. Evil ants. Like, they're evil for no reason. Like, they have no intentions as to why they would dislike this kid. I mean, they treat James like he's some servant. And again, it would probably be a little bit more understandable given if the film gave us a time frame as to when this was taking place. But we're not really given that. We're just given the premise of the ants being evil. Whereas instead, I think going with, again, the orphanage angle and just having the caretakers, just be nice and, kind of neutral. They're not really antagonists, I think would have suited this film a whole lot better, because we don't need a villain for the sake of creating a villain. We need a villain if the story allows for that premise to be incorporated in. It's not a premise that just falls from the sky. There's like legitimate backings into it. And again, I can compare this to Cinderella. With Cinderella, her dad remarries some other woman, and again, it's not until he dies that she, sort of reveals her true nature, and it's understandable within that sense, because you could see something like that kind of a scenario happening maybe to a family. Um, and it's obvious why, the stepmother shows favoritism to her biological children and not to Cinderella, who's not. So again, it's a clearly established as to the villain's motivations as to why they behave a certain way. With the ants, there's no reason as to why they're evil. They're just evil. And that makes no sense. So that definitely needed to be dropped, I think, completely. And they should have just gone with him just going to an orphanage and, being taken care of by caretakers, and they're nice to him and they don't, disrespect him or anything. But again, maybe like, again, a Disney princess, he wants to, uh, experience more out of life than just, being in an orphanage all the time. He's probably very limited, and, maybe he doesn't fit in with the other kids or something like that. And he wants to go away. And, his family had this one dream, and it's emphasized within the actual film that they wanted to go to New York. Why not have him long for that? Which they kind of do showcase within the film. But again, that could have been kept in without having to force an antagonist on him and crush his dreams, so to speak. Maybe you could have the other kids be a little bit mean to him or something, but we don't really need a direct antagonist within this film. So again, I think that would have suited it a whole lot better. Also, another issue that I have with this film is the songs are really not all that good. They're not they don't really capture the essence that it's sort of trying to showcase within the film. And again, I think they could have had a lot better material had they chosen someone like Danny Elfman to do the music, sort of similar to what they did with Nightmare Before Christmas. And actually, the director of Nightmare Before Christmas made this film, and again, they try to even reference the Nightmare Before Christmas within this film. So it just kind of goes to show that, it's one of those things where they're sort of longing for the better product that they had initially than this film. So yeah, I think the songs were a big problem. And I don't want to say it's just because Randy Newman did the music in this film. I don't want to say it's just because of him. I just think as far as, as far as tone goes, as far as the way the film is showcased, I don't think these songs kind of suit something that you would expect, from something that is very stop motion and is kind of very alternative looking, and it's Randy Newman is kind of, again, he is more Pixar. It's more, he just has a more of a corporate, kind of style, I think I want to say. I mean, I just think it works in the more Pixar, big budget, setting where, the songs are there, they're just not really as emphasized. Whereas with this kind of work, you definitely needed someone like Alan Menken or, Danny Elfman just somebody who had that kind of musical and artistic background. And clearly Randy Newman doesn't have that. So yeah, that needed to definitely change, in my honest opinion. And again, I think they could really explore this avenue of James really missing his family and really wanting to fulfill that one dream that his family had with him. You know, I could totally see this as being something of the center of this film, but the film doesn't choose to really focus on it so much as, it just focuses on the weirdness and, the antagonists and things like that, when it should be just more about James and his dream. Again, I think the whole idea of going to New York and with the insects and the peach and all that all works. It's just, again, you don't need antagonists involved. You could just have one day, the supposedly kind of fairy godmother in this film, some dude basically within the film shows up and gives him these little worm things, and basically, James ends up dropping them, and then a giant peach forms as a result. And that could have been fine. That could have been it. And then, he ends up stumbling upon the insects that live inside the peach, and they ultimately tell him, "Oh, we'll," and basically he develops a relationship with the insects initially, and then after some time passes, he kind of reveals to them his sort of dream, and they say, well, why don't we go and fulfill that? And so they basically go off and they fulfill that dream with him. And they're kind of his friends, they're kind of his companions, when all of the other kids maybe rejected him, so to speak. So he figures, yeah, why not leave? I mean, I'm not happy here. I might as well go to New York, with the insects. And basically, the whole other section of the film focuses on them basically trying to get there, and going through various trials and tribulations and such. And then ultimately they make it to New York, and they, settle down there, and everything's happy, so to speak. Maybe you could have had some friends maybe pass away or something along the journey, if you wanted to make it a little bit more of a dramatic children's tale. But again, just a simple premise like that, I think, would have suited this film a lot better. I think what the film was trying to do was make things more complicated and artsy by, again, inserting antagonists, inserting the goofy premise of the rhino, sort of playing a role as far as something to, destroy the parents and the family. I mean, that's just completely unnecessary, and it adds things that don't really amount to much. Whereas a much more simpler story that has depth means more, I think. So yeah, I think that definitely would have suited this film well. And again, I think they could have totally still gone for the kind of goofy, Nightmare Before Christmas angle as far as the animation is concerned. And I think there's some bits of this animation that really do work. But there's still some others that are just very off, especially with the rhino and, things like that. I think, if they kept it, if they wanted to put parts of it live action, which they do in the beginning, and then have him change as far as being animated is concerned, when he's with the insects, yeah, that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just kind of like him sort of going into his imagination. So I don't think that's really necessarily a bad choice as far as artisticness is concerned. but I still felt like there were certain parts that were a little goofy, and they didn't seem like that they were as well constructed as something like The Nightmare Before Christmas. I mean, when you compare this to The Nightmare Before Christmas's stop motion animation, it almost looks like it was really a side project, and you feel that there wasn't really a whole lot of much effort put into it compared to something like The Nightmare Before Christmas, which again, a lot of people that did work on the night and are part of The Nightmare Before Christmas tried to do the same thing with James and the Giant Peach. Again, it was under Walt Disney's name, and again the same director. So yeah, there was a lot of influence that I think could definitely have been carried over, but I don't think it was ultimately carried over all too well. Mainly because I think they didn't treat it with as much thought or put in a whole lot of effort compared to, again, something like The Nightmare Before Christmas. So yeah, I think that's really the biggest issues that I saw. I think if they dropped the antagonists, if they dropped the rhino scenario, had it just been an orphaned child whose parents are no longer present by whatever means, you can totally interpret that however you want, but sort of have that sort of still that dream inserted in there of them wanting as a family to go to New York, but not being able to, and him being raised in an orphanage where he's unhappy and where the children are don't really accept him, and him being able to have this giant peach and these insects as friends, and go off on an adventure, and ultimately achieve his goal, I think definitely would have suited this film a whole lot better. And there was not, again, like what actually happened within the film, there wasn't a whole lot of development with the insects. They don't really have a whole lot of personality. They have personality as far as how their characters look, but they don't have a lot of they just don't have a lot going for them. So I think definitely way more development with them was needed. But again, all could have, I think, definitely been constructed had they focused on that being a center portion of the film and not trying to insert all of these other things that don't really amount to much. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say. Maybe sprinkled in with some better animation. Then this would have not felt like, I think, a side project. But yeah, I think there's still some things within this film that I think do work. I just think that the majority of it is not executed as properly as it could have. But yeah, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.